Let's get started. I'll call the meeting to order, and I'd entertain a motion to approve the agenda.
So moved.
I'll second that.
All those in favor?
Aye.
The agenda's been approved. The first action item is the update RRR on the landfill water service district policy by Jonathan Rack.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. This first item, which is an update to the rates, rules, and regulations of Loudon Water, is actually a very simple housekeeping matter, but it involves a power of the authority that you rarely exercise. So I wanted to take a few minutes to give you some background on that, some of the history and context before asking you to approve the amendment to the rules. So in most instances, when someone is regulated by or subject to our rules, it's because they have, in some sense, decided to become a customer of Loudon Water. And the mandatory connection ordinance is one of probably the only exception I know of where Loudon Water is actually acting more like a local government than a utility that you contract with. And what the Virginia Code provides is that in certain circumstances, if there is an area where Loudon Water is extending service, water or sewer, you actually can, with the concurrence of the Board of Supervisors, require that the properties within that area connect to Loudon Water system. Normally, it's voluntary. Property owners decide whether or not they want to connect to the system. But this is an instance where the property owners would have no choice as to whether or not they connect. And in some cases, many cases elsewhere in the Commonwealth, it's used as a way to ensure that if the authority is expending the sums to extend service into an area, that they'll have the customer base that will ensure the repayment of the bonds that are necessary for paying off the debt to extend the service. This is a different circumstance where back in the, what was it, the 90s, late 80s, early 90s, in the vicinity of the Loudoun County landfill, there was a discovery that the water was contaminated by leaks from the landfill over a period of years. So Loudoun County, and Carla may remember it, I don't, actually, I guess, asked Loudon Water to extend service into this area, which otherwise had been on well and septic, as a way to prevent people living there from being contaminated by the groundwater. So Loudon Water constructed that extension into the landfill service area, and again, at the county's suggestion, adopted a mandatory connection ordinance that requires everyone living there to connect to the Loudon Water system. And so that was all done in the early 90s. The County Board of Supervisors adopted a resolution supporting the mandatory connection ordinance, which is one of the requirements in the state code. And then the Loudon Water Board at that time adopted this mandatory connection ordinance. So the requirement for properties within the landfill service area to connect has been in place since the mid-90s, but it was a standalone resolution that's in the minutes of the board. But as more development occurs and people come in, there was concern, I think staff had a concern that we might miss it, that we don't really have anything on our rates, rules, and regulations and our engineering design manual. And it's possible that someone could come in and have development. And I think the county also had similar concerns, the planning department. So what we are proposing is that you take the mandatory connection resolution, which has already been adopted in the mid-90s, and simply add it to your rates, rules, and regulations so that when someone goes through those, looks at the connection fees and so forth, whether it be Loudon Water staff, Loudon County Planning and Development, or a property owner, you'll see, okay, I'm in the landfill service area, and therefore I must connect to Loudon Water system. So as I said, it's really a housekeeping action that we're asking you to take, but because it is an exercise of this power that you rarely see, I wanted to give you that background. But I'd be happy to try and answer any questions that you have on it.
How did that come up now, Jonathan? What,
I'm going to ask Elton to.
yeah,
Yeah, thanks, Mr. Kelly.
it seems pretty obvious that we do that, but
So it actually came as a question from, I believe, from the Planning and Zoning Department at the county. They had a development application come in within the landfill service area, and they were cross-referencing the zoning ordinance and Loudon Water's rates, rules, and regs and engineering design manual. And it appeared as a gap, and they were questioning themselves, questioning their own policy, and looking to us to understand, how do we administer this? And so that's really how it came in. It came through WeTran and in the land development department.
I mean, that seems something that'd be pretty obvious. You want to connect a landfill. I mean, there are other examples. That's the only one we have. Is the only example that.
Yep, that's the only, I think it's the only mandatory connection ordinance that we have in Loudoun County.
Makes.
When we went north of Route 7, what's the name of that community? The community that had the Superfund,
Yeah, Broadland.
Yeah.
Broadland.
Farms.
Yeah. Was that mandatory? It wasn't mandatory that all those people connect, was it?
No, to the sewer system, no, it wasn't. But whether or not now that there is this Superfund site and a water system coming in to correct that issue, I'm not sure if the county will make those homes connect or not. I haven't heard that they're going to do that. I think what we even know at this point is they're going to allow them to keep those wells. Is that what we know so far, Alton?
I feel like that's what we were discussing, but we kind of knew how many people, we had people who said they definitely wanted to.
Right.
So is that an example? Could Loudon Water say, yeah, you're all connecting if we chose to do that?
Yes, that's a good question. My recollection is that those homes, we currently don't have the facilities to serve those homes, and so we wouldn't have a mandatory connection. But as we continue to work with EPA and the county on that, we may be asked by
Right.
them to adopt the mandatory connection ordinance. And the process would be that the county board of supervisors would need to adopt their own resolution endorsing our action, and then you, the board, would be asked to approve that resolution.
It would certainly make sense in that case,
Yeah.
probably, but we'll see.
In situations like that, it's an existing neighborhood. Would the county or the Superfund pay for that connection?
That's what
Well,
we're
yes.
negotiating.
Okay.
Right. A portion of that subdivision would be covered, the utilities to provide for a certain section of that subdivision will be paid for through the Superfund. However, there's a whole nother portion of that subdivision that the county has agreed to pay because it wouldn't make sense to bring water to only half the subdivision. So we're working on half with design and everything, at the county's request, and we're just kind of waiting on EPA now for so it can be done
Yeah.
together.
So if I'm an existing homeowner and I've got a well and a drain field and I fall in this, is this just applying to somebody that's coming in for new development? Or are we saying, hey, you've got to shut off your well and your existing drain field and now pay 20-some thousand or whatever it is to hook up?
I believe it applies to, or applied to existing residents as well as new development.
Okay.
Yep.
So then the obvious question there is just, are we inadvertently placing an undue burden on somebody who says, I don't have 25K sitting around to,
Well, I think that's a great question. I believe that when the initial project was put in, and since that time, at the initial installation of the mains on all the public streets and all the existing homes fronting on those streets and on the main, they were connected at that point in time. So really this is, date forward, and it was intended to be at that point in time. And I think it's generally been administered that way. That is, each development application for a parcel that fronts on streets that have the water system installed is required to connect. So I believe that's the way it's been administered. I really don't know of or believe there are, existing parcels out there still on a well in this area that would suddenly have to connect.
Yeah, at this point, since 20-some years have elapsed since the adoption. I think it only practically applies to new development within the service area. And that's why we wanted to make sure it was clear in our rates, rules, and regulations, because someone coming in to look at building a home or whatever within this area should know that this is already in place and they're going to be subject to that requirement.
Would it be okay if if we just verified that there's nobody in this area? We'll, we'll vote on this. This will, I assume, go to the full board for adoption. But between now and then, could we just double check, verify that there's not somebody there that's currently on a well and drain field? I mean, are we confident there's like nobody? Or is there
Well-
the possibility that there's some homeowners there?
We can absolutely verify it. When the county established this landfill service area, it was because of the contamination to those wells. And so there was, I believe, the county funded most of that connection because of the, and then they would get it back through this service district. I'm assuming it was more of a tax. But we can definitely get all those details, but I'm pretty confident that there is, those that were there at that time with existing wells were taken care of.
Yeah, we certainly
do
can
that.
confirm
Mhm.
it, but I do want to be clear that whether we add this language to the rates, rules, and regulations or not, the mandatory connection ordinance is in place.
Okay.
So it wouldn't make a difference one way or the other, but
Okay.
we certainly can verify.
That's helpful to know.
Yeah.
And in my mind, I'm thinking, well, if we find such a homeowner, then it's like, well, maybe we just contact them and I don't know,
Yeah.
have some discussion. Because it's reasonable that people hook up to water and sewer in this contaminated area. And if I'm a homeowner, I want that too.
Right.
And we've worked with people in the past, so I'm sure we could figure out a solution. But
Yeah, it really would have had to have been someone who kind of slipped through at the beginning, and it's doubtful.
yeah,
But sure. we
yeah,
can-
it sounds like there's not gonna be a person, but I thought, let's double check. Stranger
check,
things
yeah.
have happened.
Sure.
Right.
There's,
Well, just to be, for the record, did I read that they didn't find any contamination in the article? Like they thought there was, but they found there was no contamination, and out of preponderance of caution and for future potential, they did this. So I don't want to make it sound like there was contamination if there wasn't, that's all.
Where was that information?
It was in the packet,
Okay.
Too.
All right.
unless I read it incorrectly.
I don't remember that, there wasn't any EPA sort of super fund investigation type for the landfill. So it very well may have been that, given the proximity to the landfill, they were taking that precaution, but I'm not able to go back that far in my mind.
remind me, does this area include all of Broad Run Farms there, or just a portion of it?
Well, there's two sets. So what we're dealing with here is the landfill service area.
Just that, which is to the east of Broad Run.
Right.
Yeah, yeah.
You can see
Right.
the
Yeah.
map at the end.
Oh, wait, Mr. Campbell, I think we're referring to the Loudoun County Solid Waste
Oh, my
Management
apologies.
Facility off Evergreen Mills.
Okay,
So we-
Evergreen Mills.
Yeah.
I'm thinking Broad Run.
Right,
Okay.
okay. Right.
Okay.
Sir.
Didn't know there were houses.
There's a few behind
Get rid of
the,
that, too,
yeah,
there wasn't.
yeah, there's some behind. And there's another
Yeah, it
rural
says in
village
the
back there too,
background that
but that's not
To
included in
prevent
this.
any future, Mr. Kelly, what's the exact verbiage, can you say?
Potential, which is your right up, Jonathan, potential groundwater contamination around the county's landfill.
Yeah.
Groundwater program for the landfill indicated that no contaminants had left the landfill property. However, the board supervisors that implement a project to allay concerns in nearby residents.
Thank you for pointing that out.
I just wanted, we were talking about how there was contamination. I wanted to make sure that was clear. And then to Mr. Campbell's point, I think just doing another dive, make sure nobody fall through the cracks. And then also, this is just for hooking up to well, right? It doesn't have anything to do with septic. So you were talking about $25,000. It would only be a tap fee for water if we found somebody, just. to
Okay, so
clarify
it's
that
not
point.
sewer, just
No.
water.
That's right.
All right. So with that, I need somebody to make the appropriate motion, which.
I'll make the motion.
A second.
Okay. All those in favor?
Aye.
we can put this on consent. Next item, deed of quit claim and vacation for Skills USA Water Treatment Facility. Alton.
Good morning, Mr. Chairman. Thank you. So I'm here today seeking authorization for the general manager to sign a deed of quitclaim and vacation for the Skills USA wastewater treatment plant. Just to give you a sense of location, this facility is located about half a mile north of the village of Luckett along US Route 15, just north of Leesburg there. The Skills USA, just for a little background, they are a nonprofit trade organization that helps develop vocational skills. So they work with students, educators, employers across the USA. And this was their headquarters building, built in the late 70s, early 80s, which included a wastewater facility that is regulated by DEQ. It's a surface discharging facility. It has a capacity of 4,200 gallons per day. And this facility was constructed and paid for by Skills in the late 1970s. And then county policy at the time had, all surface discharging facilities in the county under the purview of Loudoun Water. So the policy at the time required Loudoun Water to own and operate these facilities. So, through a series of negotiations and a deed process, the facility was donated to Loudoun Water in 1985. And that put the DEQ permit under our name as well. Now, we do have agreements in place where we contract operate this facility for Skills USA under a time and materials basis. And another important distinction is that our written agreements with Skills are such that they pay for all capital upgrades required for this facility at all times. This is just a quick snapshot. It's a small scale facility. This is really the extent of it. And you can see in the left the tankage and the aeration process, and then the treatment buildings. It's a compact site. Now, I think you'll all recall, because we started discussing this earlier this month with these ammonia regulations for the community systems facilities. We first started talking to the board about this back. This is some snapshots from early 2020 when we presented. We were going to be going into a process of evaluating how we will bring all of these community systems wastewater facilities into compliance with upcoming regulatory changes by DEQ to manage ammonia. So we've been talking about this for a little while, and the Skills facility does fall into this group of projects. And so we went through a process, and we brought Black & Veatch on board to help us evaluate, the alternatives of bringing all of these facilities into compliance. I'm just showing you a couple of snapshots here. We awarded a professional services contract to Black & Veatch at that time in the fall of 2020. And by the spring of 2021, we had developed a number of alternatives to address these ammonia regulations at all of the community systems facilities. This is just giving you a snapshot of some of the acceptable alternatives to address things at the Skills facility. And, of note on this slide, the viable alternatives were, in the $1 million to $1.5 million price range. And of course, these costs are a little dated at this point in time, so we may as well say, in the $1 to $2 million range. So staff, began to talk with Skills about this evaluation. We had numerous discussions with the executive staff at Skills USA, and they had their financial consultant along with them. This slide kind of highlights, even in the alternatives that we identified in working with Black & Veatch, for some time, we've been experiencing some trouble maintaining the wastewater process at this facility because Skills has really changed their business model. This facility, they used to kind of bring folks in and have trainings, and their business was just evolving away from that model. And then the pandemic was sort of the final catalyst, and they've become more remote, and they go out to schools and employers and help do trainings, and a lot of their stuff is online. And so as we discussed with them, these alternatives we identified we still might need to fine tune to make sure we can meet treatment process requirements and so forth. So that became a concern for all of us. So again, we reviewed these options with Skills, and they were interested in exploring other options, knowing they have this treatment plant that produces, or that is permitted of a capacity of 4,200 gallons per day. They see a future where they don't need capacity of that magnitude. And that's where another option comes into play, where they can explore installing an alternative on-site septic system on their site and get away from a surface discharging facility, and really something that's more manageable for them. So they're wanting to move in that direction as an organization. So we even, had conversations with them and put them into contact with folks that could help them explore that option a little further, because that would be something that they would pursue on their own and construct and permit on their own through the Loudoun County Health Department. So in summary, we want to move to authorize the general manager to be able to execute this deed of quitclaim and vacation, which would essentially turn these facilities and their associated easements back over to ownership of Skills USA. And, it would really allow them to control their own destiny. They would be able to pursue this new alternative, and really we've agreed to stay on and support their transition through the current contract operations model that we have in place. And so in summary, we'd be asking you to authorize the general manager to sign these deeds, or this deed, contingent upon Skills formally requesting ownership of the facility.
I only have one question. Does this in any way interfere with the limestone overlay? We're not, and again, it's not really our problem anyway, but is there any?
It's a great question. And that's, I think, perhaps why they're working through a process with a consultant to do soil evaluations and understand, can they achieve a design that will meet their needs? I think they're a little ways along in that process, but we want to be positioned to, once they verify that and their ability to comply, we want to be in a position to go ahead and sign this back over to them.
It seems like we're taking the liability off our
Right.
books. So,
Are we taking it off? If we quitclaim this to them, they own it, they screw up, they're discharging, they're violating EPA rules or something, it's not our problem anymore?
In signing this deed, the associated documentation to transfer the permit to Skills USA would be part of this package. They would be the permittee, and we would contract operate for them.
How did they end up there? Isn't that the oddest place in the world to have a nonprofit in the middle of the fields? How did they get the land donated or something?
It's the 70s.
I don't know.
So,
Nothing.
so we could deed them the property in theory, in a month, well before they figured out some sort of new plan. Do we want to do that? Does it make more sense
So the
to?
way we've structured the motion is to allow Carla to execute this when all of the conditions have been resolved, but it's not actually requiring that Carla execute the deed. So there's a contingency in it.
Well, it just says contingent on them formally requesting ownership.
Right.
So what if they formally requested ownership tomorrow?
Well, we can turn it over to them, and then it's their problem.
Yeah.
So
Right, but
It's a win for us. I don't see any downside. We're still available to be a contractor if they
Okay.
need
If
us
they
to
have
operate
problems.
it, and we get paid a fee for that. So great, but
Yep.
it's not on us. It's, all those little facilities we've got to upgrade for ammonia. It's like one less one that we
oh, I
have
know,
to
I'm
do.
just thinking about optics and,
I think it's great.
all right. Just want to make sure that that's clear.
I believe
That
Mr.
could
Koblis
happen.
has a question as well.
Pardon me,
I believe Mr. Koblis has a question.
Mr. Koblis?
Yes, I was just patiently waiting with my hand waving and waving and waving.
Couldn't see it. Couldn't
I don't
see
know
it.
who was monitoring. I was just about ready to say something. No, I guess this is kind of a question for Jonathan, maybe. Were they forced to be on our system like these other communities? Or did we did they ask us to be on our system, or how'd that work in the beginning?
My recollection, and Alton can check me on it, is that at the time that they developed their property, I believe, first of all, their land use approvals required that Loudon Water be the operator of this system, perhaps the owner as well.
Yeah, and I think,
And that was essentially a zoning requirement that the county imposed.
And so the zoning has changed now and they can vacate it. So,
That's
uh,
correct.
so just down the street, Selma could say, okay, I want to run my own system now, Loudon Water, get out.
No, the difference with Selma, for example, is that in their special exception approval, I think it was, there's a condition that requires Loudon Water own and operate the system. That's sort of the first instance. And then secondarily, of course, we own it, so that we'd have to agree to give it up.
And why aren't we paying for their new system? Since we've owned this system forever.
It really, I think, has to do with the arrangement that was made when they initially developed, where they took on the risk and the liability of any kind of upgrades. And that probably was because we were trying to protect Loudon Water at the time of the development.
that's correct.
Okay, I just want to make sure we've got all our T's crossed and I's dotted so that they all of a sudden go, oh, by the way, you know, you guys got to pay for this. All right, that's all I got.
So Jonathan, there's no report, no burden on us once we would claim if they build a septic system, it's not working or it's not right or it doesn't meet code or something, that's on them. That we don't have any, there's no tie back to us.
Yeah, we would have no continuing relationship other than potentially a contractual relationship to provide operations for them. Yeah.
And if
they
they
choose.
sold this thing to some motel or something like that, and they wanted to get back in, they couldn't force us to take over the plant after that?
Correct.
And we don't have any responsibility for dismantling the existing plant, or is it up to us to dismantle that plant?
No, and in fact, I think we included in the draft deed that it is their obligation to decommission and deal with the existing structures.
Okay.
I have a couple questions, just for my own edification. So if you go to a drain field, you're not subject to these ammonia requirements that DEQ has. It's only with surface discharge plants.
Correct.
Okay. So surface discharge means they're putting the water or the effluents from that in a stream.
Correct. Yeah, they're
Okay.
going actually to a bit to the northeast. They actually their discharge crosses under Route 15 and discharges into the stream there just to the northeast of their plant.
Okay, so that's why they're subject to that.
Yeah.
So, I read one thing on that chart in there that they were thinking of going to a drain field, but they didn't have enough land. So I thought, so my question would be, if that's true, my thought was correct, how are they gonna do it? Because they were looking at a drain field for 4,200 gallons per day, and they're gonna substantially reduce that. That's
Yeah,
how they could get a drain filled.
I'm fairly certain you're spot on that. I think, there were certain, boundaries that were drawn around the analysis Black and Veatch did. And we really didn't at the time understand that they had, looked to wholly change their operation there. And so we were really a little more narrow in our evaluation there. But I think it's number 3 here on the list, an on-site discharge system. They're talking about the additional land needs. And once we sat down and went through this evaluation with the skills executive staff and talked more about it, we also gained a greater understanding of they own a substantial amount of land there. I think their campus building and the wastewater plant is on maybe 50 acres, and then they actually own another 50 plus acres just to the north. And, as we talked through the alternative and the possibility and how this has become more commonplace along the corridor, you have Vanish and Roots and other businesses that are going the route of the alternative on-site septic system. And that's when they really started to think, okay, well, we might want to, change direction altogether and probably save ourselves a lot of money. And
So this was based on the discharge of 4,200 a day. They don't have a big enough field, but if
Right.
it's 600 or 1,000, they
Mhm.
probably would have a big enough
Mhm.
field. Okay, I just wanted to clarify that in my
Mr. Copeland.
mind. And then it really cost $1 to $2 million to take their existing plant just to make it ammonia
Mhm.
safe. It's that expensive.
Mhm.
Wow. I mean, I know we got that presentation, but be interesting to know what actually would happen to this plant too. That's for another discussion at some other point. Okay. I was just blown away by those numbers.
Hey, Mark has,
I can't see
Mr. Koblis.
All right.
Yeah, I'm just really learning on this. So who's to monitor that they're not going to go back to their 4,200 gallon discharge? All of a sudden they go, oh, the new director comes in and says, oh, no, I want to go back to the way we were. But whose problem is it then? Do they have to come back to us, or I don't know. I just want to make sure that we're not going to be caught red-handed somehow and who's going to regulate that they have, only less than 4,200, the 600 or 1,000.
Yeah, excellent question. They would, if they go the route of installing this on-site system, they would fall under the purview of the Loudoun County Health Department. So they would have a permit with the health department for a specific capacity, and that would require O&M and inspections at a little greater frequency than your typical residential system. But that would sort of be the regulatory component at that point.
And I assume they already have this permit, because I can't believe they put the cart before the horse.
Our permit, we're giving them, right?
The drain field, though, the permit for the drain field, all the regulations that go with.
Yeah, but
with
we were
the-
talking about the permit to operate this little surface discharge plant. I mean, that, we have that permit currently.
Correct.
But this deed of quitclaim and vacation, we give it to them if they ask for it. And they may never ask for it. We don't know that either.
Yeah.
They have to go through the normal, county regulations to build a
Correct.
drain field and all that. So they would get that first before they would say, okay, it's time to do the quitclaim. Okay.
All right.
I don't see any downside to us with
Yeah.
this at all.
Does anyone else have any questions?
No, I would ask though, can I read the motion? The only reason I say that is sometimes, maybe not that many people listen to our meetings. I don't know, but for the record, it's nice if you don't have the thing up in front of you and so, hey, I make a motion. It's like, I don't know, what was the motion, and so sometimes it's nice to just read the thing.
Yeah.
I don't mind reading it, but,
There you go.
or it's up here too. Thank you. I move that the board authorize the general manager to execute the deed of quitclaim and vacation with Skills USA, contingent on Skills USA formally requesting ownership of the facility.
Second,
Second.
all those in favor?
Aye.
Aye. All right, we can put this on consent as well.
Thank you.
The third action item is the approval of Davenport and Company Financial Services Advisory Contract. Mr. Carnes?
Good morning. Thank you. Our current contract with Davenport and Company is set to expire next month. We've been writing the contract that they have with Montgomery County, Virginia, and they extended that for another year, and there is one more extension available.
Where's Montgomery County, Virginia?
It's south. It's south, yes. Yeah.
Yeah.
And so just a couple quick highlights of the contract. We don't pay a retainer fee to Davenport. We pay them when we use their services. So they have hourly rates for special projects, and we determine those fees beforehand. And then we pay for any debt issuance costs with them, which we incurred last year. And so I'm asking for an extension of that contract for 1 year, and that's the recommended motion.
Ryan, just a quick question.
Mhm.
Extension is under the current rates, it's just everyth's rates.
So the rates increased, the contract has a clause that it increases by the CPIW, which was 4.1% last year.
What's the W, CPI?
Urban wage earners and clerical workers.
Okay, so we're CPI plus W.
Yes, yes, yes.
All right, I think this is my 8th straight year of renewing this contract, so.
Yes, most likely.
Does anyone else have any questions? All right, let's read the motion, somebody.
I move approval of contract award to Davenport and Company for financial advisory services for the period of May 14th, 2022 through May 14th, 2023, under the terms and conditions competitively negotiated by Montgomery County, Virginia.
All those in favor?
Aye.
All right.
Thank you.
Thank
We can
you.
put this on consent as well. Action item D, personnel budget adjustment for inflation. Darla?
Good morning. So I am here to ask the committee's consideration of an increase to the 2022 personnel budget to cover an inflationary salary adjustment for Loudon Water employees. As you know, inflation has hit 8.5% last month. And just a little background, prior to 2009, Loudon Water had a cost of living or COLA adjustment in their pay system. Effective in 2009, we moved away from that. We now have a pay for performance system with the average increase of 3% to employees. And again, it varies, but the average is 3. And that merit increase is provided to employees every February for the prior year's performance.
And it's salary, not bonus, right?
It's salary,
Okay.
yes, affects their retirement, et cetera. We can do some hybrids there, not to get into all the details, but we can do some lump sum adjustments if someone is considerably over their market, or we can do a salary increase. We have options there. But our current system is really driven by the market and market references. And so when you're looking at someone's performance, you're also looking at their market reference to really see where they are competitively. And so we do look at inflation and typically then increase your market values, market references. In this case, this is a challenging year, as you all know. And so what we did was we participated in an informal survey that was done by the Virginia Water and Waste Authorities Association. And I know this is difficult to read, and hopefully you were able to look at it online. But we wanted to see what everyone has done, both during the pandemic and then up to this point. And really the takeaways from this are a couple of things. Everyone has done something to help employees get through this challenge. Back in 2021, we did provide lump sum adjustments to our essential workers only. Those did not affect salary. Those again were lump sum. And a couple other takeaways, we are one of 2 on this survey that have fiscal year ends December 31. Typically, the others are July 1 to June 30. And so we've reached out. What are you doing? What are you going to do? What have you done? And as you can see, we focus on Loudoun County over this 3-year period. It's an increase of about 11.5% for their employees. Town of Leesburg is about 12%. And so if you look at that same period of time for our employees, assuming we keep with our 3% merit type increase, we're at about 9%. And so I am respectfully asking if the board would consider an adjustment for our employees. I've given some cost impacts in your write-up. I do feel confident that we can absorb this in the overall budget. However, there are, with the uncertainty in pricing in the market, I would rather reserve any other potential savings to make sure that we can cover chemicals and gasoline. And while we feel confident we can, we just don't know for sure. And we'll know more when we do our mid-year review. But at this time, I am asking for the board to consider the inflationary increase effective June 1st. That would be 7 months out of this year, so it's not a full annual increase. And I am happy to answer any questions you have. We have looked at the impact on our user rates and the impact on our 5-year plan, and it really is immaterial to our overall budget, very material to our hardworking staff.
Are you having difficulty? Do you have a lot of open positions that have been open for longer than you wish they had been open for?
We do. We've had probably a little more turnover as well in the last 12 to 18 months than we typically do. It's well known that public really cannot compete with private, and our employees understand that, but they get great benefits, and this is a great place to be. But what you find is some of your younger workforce, this might not be, they want to do that travel. They want to do that, more money thing. So that's kind of what you see too, people looking for additional opportunities. But as far as vacancies, yeah, we do have some, I would say mostly in our operations group, and Elton could kind of speak to that, but,
So this would affect all employees, whatever ends up being approved would affect all employees, regardless of level. Would it affect your starting salaries or your ranges? Open position, would you increase those?
yes, we would. We would apply an inflationary factor to our market references as well. Otherwise, we're going to fall behind.
Does anybody else have any questions?
When you say we can't compete with the private sector, how far ahead of us is the private sector in terms of salaries and all of this? How far behind are we? If there's
Well, I don't like to view it as behind. It's just different, right? I mean, we work 37 and a half hours a week, and believe me, there are people here who work more than that, but our typical week is 37 and a half hours a week. We're salary. Private sector could be they're working 40 hours a week. So on that, it's not really one-to-one. I don't think that we're that far behind. I just think that we offer a different work-life balance. We offer a different benefits package. And so when you look at the whole picture, I think, we may even kind of rise above that, but we're not so far behind. We have people from the private sector that come here and may not make as much money, but see those other benefits. So I think it's a wash. At least I like to think so.
The only reason it's in my, I remember when Nicole left, and then we've lost some other longtime folks. And maybe that's an offline discussion, but I'm just going, it's so valuable to have those folks, not lose them, not have to train new people. So you go, if we got to pony up a little bit more or whatever, then let's do it. At least that's my perspective, but I don't know. So maybe that.
And I would say, and maybe I'm naive, but I think that the majority of Loudwater employees would feel that they are fairly compensated. I think in this challenging time that they could use some help.
Yeah.
Well,
I'm happy with the 3%. I don't know what you guys think.
I have a quick question. So we budgeted for personnel for this year, 40,619,000. And I know 3.5 million was for that post 65 health
Right.
plan.
right.
How are we, and you look at the past, we've always been under,
Right.
we budgeted 34 million and we ended up coming in at 32.7 for last year. Are we still under? I mean, I don't want to put you on the spot, but we still think we're under the 40 million?
We do.
Okay.
We do.
At this point,
Right.
we do.
And with the if we did authorize a 3% raise, that's $500,000. Is that still, would we still be under?
We think so,
Okay.
but I think our concern is that there's going to be
Other stuff
increases in others.
On the expense,
Mhm.
Right.
okay. But
Our hope is that we come back, at the end of the year, and we didn't necessarily need to ask, because I don't like to ask for more money once our budget is approved, but given the uncertainty of some of our other line items, I just want to make sure
Okay.
at this point.
that we're aware of that we could be over budget on other stuff.
Right.
And you look at these numbers for the 3 years, I mean, we'd be in second to last place. So. Okay. Does anyone else have any questions? I can't see if Mark's hand's raised. It's not.
See a little hand there.
All right. With that, sounds like we're all in agreement of 3%, correct?
I'm good with that.
Okay,
Can you read it?
please.
I move the board approve an increase of what?
$576,000.
$576,000 or 1.4% to the 2022 personal budget to provide a 3% inflationary salary adjustment to all employees.
Second. All those in favor?
Aye.
We probably should put this on action, you think?
Yeah.
And give a quick presentation that the
Yeah.
board- that the finance department has approved it, but we want the rest of the board to be aware of it.
That's fair.
Okay.
Can I make a suggestion?
Sure.
Can we just go ahead and try to just put it on consent?
Yeah, I mean, and
Uh,
if someone has a question,
Yeah,
send
because
it in and we can discuss it
I
then.
just can see that this could be brought up by other members as something to discuss for many minutes. So
All right.
I'm trying to say this as delicately as I can.
No, I'm fine. I'm fine with that, Mr. Chairman.
Anybody can pull it out of consent. if they
Right,
want to.
and we can have a make sure that it's open to be discussed as part of the consent. Okay, all right, consent it is.
Thank you very much.
Good idea.
All right, that wraps up the action items. We're on to information educational items. The first one is the monthly financial summary. Mr. Carnes.
Thank you. Total revenues are at 34.2 million at the end of March. The forecast was 36.6 million. So we're trending under on non-operating revenue, which is mainly your availability charges. Our connections are a little bit down from what we projected at this point. We did do a review through the end of March, and based on the activity that's planned for the rest of the year, we do think we're still going to meet our projection, but this is something that we'll continue to monitor through the rest of the year. Expenses are at 34 million, which is a little under forecast. Capital contributions are 7.1 million, which is from availability charges. We had 407 connections through the end of March. Last year at this time, we had 741 connections. And again, most of that is data centers. If you look at the past 2 years and compare residential and commercial, we're actually above where we were the past 2 years. It's all in data centers where we're seeing that. The capital spending plan was 11.4 million through the end of March, 7.1 million funded by user rates and 4.3 million funded by availability charges. And then at the end of March, cash equivalents and investments was 270 million with a weighted average yield of 0.71%, which is actually an increase. So
7.65,
yes.
6 basis points. Does anyone have any questions on that? Okay, the quarterly investment review.
So this is through the end of March. As I just mentioned, our total investments was 270 million, and you can see the breakdown there. So the trends, our portfolios stayed about the same from the end of the last quarter. LGIP, which was 0.24, is now actually up above 0.4%. So big change there at the end of yesterday, actually. So as you know, rates are improving. So we had 15 million roll off, and that was at a lovely yield of 0.11%. We invested 7 million and got 1.78%. I did want to note that the same day that we invested that 7 million, we invested an additional 15.9 million, and the average rate on those was 2.46, but those didn't actually settle until April. So you'll see that.
It was what, 2 years?
One was 2 years and one was 3 years.
Okay.
That one was a 2-year that you're seeing up there. Mhm.
Good, that'll bring our yield up.
Yes. So, and we plan to invest more next month. So we should be getting some better rates as our old rates roll off. So that's the investment strategy for next quarter. And so that's it. I'm happy to answer any questions.
Be nice to get a little yield
Yeah.
over the
Yes.
coming years.
Yes.
All right. We have an audit meeting now. Is that what we're going into?
So next month, we
Oh,
asked
May.
in May to combine the audit and
Okay.
finance committee meetings.
Can we do it now?
I wish, I wish,
The audit committee's not here.
I wish. The chair is.
Who wants to be on the audit committee?
All right, so then that's the next meeting. And then one other item is our June 30th. I mean, our June Finance Committee meeting. I'd like to move it to the 30th if possible. I don't know when it
30th.
was originally scheduled. I will be out of the country if it's the week before, which was the 23rd, I
Mhm.
think. Because sometimes we do the third week, sometimes we do the fourth week, depending on how long the month is. I never completely understood it, but if we could move it to the 30th, does anyone have a conflict with that day? It's the last,
Check.
it's the last Thursday of June.
Probably fine.
Okay.
I don't go many places.
Gotta get out there.
No, I got kids.
Yeah, that's true.
June.
All right, so does anyone else have anything? With that, if not, I'll entertain a motion to adjourn.
So moved.
Second, Mr. Second over there. All right, all those in favor?
Aye.
Aye, meeting is adjourned.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.